If we are jumping back at the API documentation and look at other endpoints that are available, you're going to see here this section with private APIs. So what does it mean? We're going to see this section with private APIs also here. Everywhere it says private endpoint, private endpoint, private endpoint, and so on. What is with this endpoint? In the vast realm of web APIs, security and efficient user management are really super important. Token-based authentications offers a powerful and flexible solution to address many concerns. Unlike traditional session-based authentication, token-based methods do not rely on server-side storage of user sessions. Instead, they generate a token upon user login, which encapsulates the user's credentials or claims. Okay, this is not a simple topic by any means, but I'm going to try to simplify it as much as possible. But if you're confused about cookies, sessions, tokens, check the resources folder for an animated explanation of this concept. Now, with this API, we're going to work with tokens. And these tokens, typically in the form of a simple token, are like a temporary password, or some of them can be sent in a more standardized format, which is called JSON Web Token, or simply called JWT. If an endpoint requires authentication, like the ones that we see here, we need to send a valid token with every API request. So again, a token is just like a temporary password, right? Now, instead of sending our own password, we send this token, which adds an additional layer of security. Now, the server will verify the token, and if the token is valid, then it will go and then it will do what we have asked the server to do. For security reasons, a token has a short expiration time, typically only a few minutes, meaning that if someone has your token, they will have a very short time when they can use it. And after a few minutes, that token expires, is no longer good. So sometimes in Postman, when you're using these tokens, a request may work initially, and then after a few minutes, we're coming back, you're sending the request with the same information, and then all of a sudden it doesn't work. And this is typically because that token has expired and you need to generate a new one. So let's go ahead and try to understand how we can use one of these private APIs. And I'm going to begin here with /my crocodiles, which should list all my crocodiles. I'm going to click on it. And when we're doing this, we're going to see here this message here is asking us to log in, which we could, of course, do. But we're going to do things a bit different. So I'm going to simply go ahead and copy this address that you see here right on top. And I'm going to jump into Postman, open up a new tab, and paste the address. Let's go ahead and click on send. What we're going to get back is 401 unauthorized. Sometimes we may get back a 403 depending on how the API or the web application is constructed. But essentially here is very clear. We're trying to access some resource, a list of crocodiles. And this is a private list, so we need to provide authentication. Now, the way we provide authentication for this particular endpoint is by providing that token. So we first need to get a valid token and then to use it in this request. So how can we get a valid token? Let's take a look at the previous request that we have here. So in this case, we are logging in with some information. So I'm going to run this once again. We're going to get here a new token. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. Go back to our get request. And here in Postman is trying to help us a bit, trying to make our life a bit easier. So I'm going to go here to authorization. And the type that I'm going to select would be bearer token. And what we'll get here is this field, and it is asking for our input. So this is where we need to paste the token. So I'm going to paste here the token. Make sure not to add any spaces or anything else. I'm going to click here on send. And what we're going to get back is a bit surprising. It's 200 OK. But look at this here. What's this thing? Well, first of all, 200 OK indicates that everything is OK. And remember, you have to think about what are we trying to do, right? Well, we are at an endpoint which is supposed to give us our crocodiles. Well, we don't have any crocodiles, so what we're getting back is an empty list. This is simply a list, but because there are no crocodiles, the square bracket is at the beginning, there's a square bracket at the end, and this represents an empty list of crocodiles. Perfectly fine, perfectly valid response. There is no error, there is no problem with this. All right, so what has happened? Why does it work all of a sudden? Well, from an HTTP perspective, if we're looking here at the headers, what we're going to see here is actually the Postman has added this authorization header. It has this particular structure here where we have the word bearer, space, and then our token. Correct. So let's try to replicate this request in K6 as well. So I'm going to start by simply copying this address. And inside K6, let's go ahead and go all the way down here. So we're going to use HTTP. What are we trying to do? We're trying to get a list of crocodiles. So I'm going to use here HTTP get. And I'm going to break this down in multiple lines so that it's a bit easier to manage because we need to provide some additional information. So if I'm going to try to do it like this and to run this, what we should get back is status code 401. Of course, this is not something that we want. So let's go ahead and see here. This is the last request that we're sending. It says here, unauthorized 401 authentication credentials were not provided. So we need to provide these credentials. Now, where do we provide these credentials? Well, we have to take a look at get. So we'll see here, get. First argument is the URL. We have provided that. The second argument is params. So if we're looking and comparing, for example, with HTTP post, the second one is the body, and only the third one are the params. So here we are going to have to create this object, which is pretty similar. So let me explain. I'm going to add here a comma. This is the beginning of the object. What do we have inside the object? We have inside the object headers. I'm going to add here the headers property. Headers is again an object. So what we need to write here is the name of the header. So the name of the header will be authorization. Now we cannot copy it from anywhere. We can try and copy it from Postman, for example, to see if it's helping us. So let's see, copying here authorization. We need to always make sure that we're not making any mistakes. Authorization, okay, perfect. Column. And then we need to specify the value. The value will be, as you see here, bearer. And we're not going to hard code a value. So it's bearer space, and then comes a valid access token. And luckily, look at us, we already have here a valid access token. So this is how we are providing this authorization data to the request. So let's go ahead and run this once again. And if we're taking a look here at the response, what do we have here? We are requesting data from this endpoint. We are providing authorization information in the headers. And look, we're getting back 200 OK. The body is simply an empty array, but this is absolutely fine. So you can see how it pays off to be organized in the code, to have no hard-coded data, because now things are pretty interesting. Every time you run this, we create a new user, we get an access token, and then we use that access token in a third request. You don't have to change anything about this, and it automatically works.